So in this lesson, we're going to look at birth, and more specifically, we're going to look at the different stages of labour. So as a very brief overview, in stage 1 of labour, this is where the cervix relaxes and it begins to dilate and efface. In stage 2, this is when the contractions really begin to kick in to their full strength, and this is when the infant itself is passed out through the birth canal. The third and final stage is mostly to do with the placenta, the amnion and the chorion, and this is where these external embryonic membranes are passed out through the birth canal, and this happens a little while after pregnancy. So now let's look at each in a little bit more detail. In stage 1, we've got some very rough timings here, and this is going to vary so greatly, but I've added it in here anyway. So stage 1 takes about 4 to 9 hours. And during this stage, those uterine contractions become stronger, and they occur roughly every 30 minutes. It's during this time that the cervix dilates to 10 centimetres, and it's at this time that I'd like to draw your attention to the cervix in this diagram here. Now, in part 1, down here, or right 1, we can see the cervix is not dilated, meaning the cervix hasn't spread apart, and it's also not effaced. Now, this word effaced is referring to the thickness of the cervix itself. And when we're talking about effacement, as the cervix is stretched out, as it gets thinner, this is referring to the effacement. So where the cervix itself gets thinner. And as the cervix dilates, as the cervix effaces, it creates the birth canal. And this is that singular passage straight from the uterus through the cervix and vagina to the outside of the body. Stage 2. During stage 2, it can take anywhere, again, very, very rough timings, from 20 minutes to 2 hours. And it's during this stage that the waters break or that the amniotic membrane ruptures. And it's at this time that the fetus is then going to begin to move through that cervix, and it's also going to result in the stretching of the vagina. Now, that stretching of the vagina is what causes the women to not only contract the uterine muscles, so the muscles in the wall of the uterus made up of smooth muscle, but also the muscles, or the abdominal muscles, which are a form of skeletal muscle. Now, those contractions of both the abdominal muscles in conjunction with those uterine muscles is what is going to push the fetus through the vagina. So I've got an image down the bottom here, but let's have a look at each stage in a little bit more detail. So at the very beginning of the second stage, we can see that the baby's head is starting to turn, and it's turning towards the mother's back. It's turning towards this spinal cord. Now, when we're looking at that, the amnion has ruptured as well. Okay, so those waters have broken. In stage 2, or later in stage 2, I should say, the baby's head has really begun to force its way to the entrance of the vagina, and its shoulders gradually tilt, and one shoulder comes up above the other so that they can turn and fit in between the bones of the pelvis. And it's at this stage, generally, that the baby's head is completely turned towards the mother's back. In the last part of stage 2, this is when the baby's head emerges from the vagina. We can't see it in this image, but the baby's head corrects itself somewhat, turns to the side, and the rest of the baby will follow it out of the vagina. The very last stage of labour then occurs roughly 5 minutes after the baby has been fully delivered, and this is where the uterus then continues to contract, and both the placenta, the amnion, and the chorion are all delivered. Now, they will still be connected to the fetus via this umbilical cord that we can see. I haven't done a very good job there. That we can see, and what happens there is that the umbilical cord is firstly clamped before it is cut.